You're hearing from the grandmother of a 9-year-old girl who was shot and killed Monday night. The girl's mom was also shot but survived.
Fox 26's Dominique Keith joining us live from downtown Houston, where the mom's ex-boyfriend is now in jail, charged with Khylie's murder.
Yeah, and Khylie's grandmother is speaking out for the first time, even as more details about that tragic night are now being released. Now, Jeremiah Jones is being held in jail without bond. When he appears in court on Tuesday, prosecutors are expected to ask a judge to keep it that way. Coming up in the 6 o'clock hour, we'll hear from a community activist who also spoke with Jeremiah Jones and who went to check out what he says will prove his innocence. Reporting live in downtown Houston, I'm Dominique Keith, Fox 26 News.
It's just a hurtful process at this time, and we're devastated.
A 9-year-old girl named Khylie Sorrells was shot in the head while she lay in her bed. She didn't provoke anyone. She wasn't involved in any fight. But she died because a man couldn't handle rejection. On the night of June 13th, 2022, her mother's ex-boyfriend, Jeremiah Jones, broke into the apartment where Khylie lived with her mother, Brittany Sorrells. What followed was a crime that shocked even the most hardened detectives. Jones didn't just want to hurt Brittany. He wanted to destroy her happiness, her motherhood, her reason to live. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was carefully planned, and it happened despite repeated warnings to police, despite a restraining order, despite the fact that Jeremiah was already facing multiple criminal charges. So how did this happen? Why did no one stop him? And how could a little girl, who was asleep in her own room, become a target? This is the story of Khylie Sorrells, a life taken in revenge, a case that raises serious questions about domestic violence protections in America. If you're captivated by real crime stories that peel back the layers of truth, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us as we uncover real cases, raise awareness, and give a voice to the voiceless. Before we dive into today's story, we want to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? And how do you feel as the story unfolds? Welcome to Deadly Crime Unmasked, the show where we expose the shocking crimes that rip through communities and the chilling secrets lurking behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications. You won't want to miss the gripping story that's coming up. Now let's dive in. Khylie Sorrells was living in Houston, Texas. She was a student and lived with her mother, Brittany Sorrells, in a residential apartment complex. She had no history of conflict, legal issues, or behavioral problems. From all available information, Khylie was a child focused on school and day-to-day childhood activities. There is no record of Khylie being involved in a relationship conflict between her mother and Jeremiah Jones. Her role in this case is that of a bystander who was targeted due to her connection to her mother. She had no personal connection to Jeremiah Jones beyond the fact that he was her mother's former boyfriend. Brittany Sorrells is the mother of Khylie Sorrells. She lived with her daughter in an apartment complex in Houston. Brittany was previously in a relationship with Jeremiah Jones. The nature of that relationship included allegations of abuse, threats, and intimidation. At some point before the murder, Brittany ended the relationship. Following the breakup, she reportedly received multiple threats from Jones. In response, she took legal action. She filed a restraining order against him and informed law enforcement about the danger she believed she and her daughter were facing. Despite taking those legal steps, Brittany remained vulnerable. She was still living in the same area, and Jones had not been taken into custody for earlier threats. There is no evidence that Brittany willingly allowed Jones into her home on the night of the murder. However, reports suggest he arrived at the apartment and forced his way in or was let in under duress. During the attack, Brittany was shot in the shoulder. She survived and later identified Jeremiah Jones as the shooter. She has been a key witness in the case and has cooperated with investigators. Her role in this case is as both the mother of the victim and the intended target of the suspect. The motive behind the murder appears to be revenge of the breakup and her decision to distance herself from Jones. Brittany had taken multiple steps to protect herself and her daughter, but those measures were not enough to prevent the crime. Before the murder of 9-year-old Khylie Sorrells, there was a history, a pattern of control, threats, and warnings that were ignored. This part of the story focuses on a relationship between Brittany Sorrells and Jeremiah Jones, and how it moved from dating to danger. Brittany Sorrells was a young mother living in Houston, Texas. She met Jeremiah Jones when she was still trying to build a peaceful life for herself and her daughter. In the beginning, things may have seemed normal, but over time, the true nature of the relationship began to show. Jeremiah Jones is a 22-year-old and the ex-boyfriend of Brittany Sorrells. He had a history of criminal activity. Court records and police reports show that he was involved in several violent incidents. He had been arrested for crimes including unlawful possession of a firearm, evading arrest, and making terroristic threats. Despite these charges, he was repeatedly released on bond. Within their relationship, Jones showed signs of control and aggressive behavior. He wanted to monitor Brittany's actions. He reportedly didn't want her talking to other men, going certain places, or even living freely. According to Brittany and her later statements to authorities, the relationship quickly became stressful and unsafe. As the situation got worse, Brittany decided to end the relationship, but that decision didn't bring safety. It brought new risks. Jones refused to accept the breakup. He continued to contact her, and reports suggest that he often made threats. These were not just casual arguments. They included specific threats of violence. These threats were not vague or hidden. According to police records and Brittany's own reports, Jones made direct threats against her safety. He also made indirect comments implying he could harm people close to her. Brittany reported these threats to law enforcement. She contacted the Houston Police Department, submitted statements, and made it clear that she felt unsafe. She specifically expressed concerns that Jones could become violent. She documented his behavior. The threats were on record, but no immediate action was taken to detain or restrict Jones beyond standard procedure. He remained at large. To protect herself and her child, Brittany filed a restraining order against Jeremiah Jones. The court granted it, legally barring him from coming near Brittany or her home. A restraining order is a civil court order issued to prevent further harassment or harm. It carries legal consequences for violations, but its effectiveness depends entirely on enforcement. If the subject ignores the order and authorities do not act immediately, the order becomes useless. In this case, Jeremiah ignored the restraining order. He continued to make contact and approach Brittany. She notified police, but there is no public record indicating that Jones was arrested for violating the order. This was a critical moment. A documented violation of a protective order should have led to immediate arrest. It did not. At the time of Khylie's murder, Jeremiah Jones was already involved in multiple criminal cases. He had several pending charges. These were not minor offenses. They included illegal possession of a firearm as a convicted felon, assault on a family member, evading arrest with a vehicle. Each of these charges carries serious weight in the Texas legal system. Possession of a weapon alone is a felony when the individual has a criminal record. Assault charges, especially those tied to domestic violence, signal a clear risk of escalation. Evading arrest is an additional indicator that the suspect may not comply with court instructions or future legal orders. These charges should have raised red flags for prosecutors and judges when considering Jones's custody status. Despite the severity of his charges, Jeremiah Jones was granted bond. He was allowed to walk free while awaiting trial. Bail is meant to ensure a defendant appears in court, but it also assumes the person does not pose an immediate threat to the public. There were multiple reasons to consider Jones a threat. Brittany had filed complaints. A restraining order was in place. Jones had a history of violence. He had ignored previous court mandates. Still, bond was approved. Reports indicate that he posted bond and was released. This decision placed Brittany and her daughter at direct risk. With no GPS monitoring, no enforced stay-away order, and no proactive supervision, Jones was able to approach Brittany's apartment freely. The restraining order was still active, but not enforced. He used this freedom to commit the crime that followed. This situation demonstrates a systemic breakdown. Law enforcement had received reports. The court had issued a protective order. Prosecutors knew Jones faced serious charges, yet the suspect was released. The warning signs were visible: a violent history, direct threats, legal complaints, violations of court orders. All of these signs pointed to a high-risk individual. The system had the tools to act, arrest, detain, revoke bond, or enforce monitoring, but none were used in time. It was a Monday evening in Houston, Texas. Inside a quiet apartment complex on Renwick Drive, Khylie Sorrells was getting ready for bed. Her mother, Brittany Sorrells, was at home with her, winding down for the night. Everything appeared normal on the outside, but what was about to happen inside that apartment would lead to one of the most disturbing crimes in the city that year. At some point that night, Jeremiah Jones, Brittany's ex-boyfriend, showed up at the apartment. According to police reports, Brittany opened the door and allowed him in. It is believed she may have done so under threat or fear, but this part of the story is still under investigation. What is known for certain is that Jeremiah was not welcome, and there was a restraining order in place. He was not supposed to be there. Once inside the apartment, Jeremiah and Brittany began to argue. Witnesses later reported that the argument grew heated. No one else was present inside the apartment besides Brittany, Khylie, and Jeremiah. The argument was brief, but the consequences were permanent. At some point during the confrontation, Jeremiah left the room where he had been speaking to Brittany and walked toward the bedroom where Khylie was. The 9-year-old girl was in her own room, likely resting or preparing for sleep. There was no physical struggle, no warning. Jeremiah Jones entered the room and shot Khylie in the head at close range. She died on the spot. Right after shooting Khylie, Jeremiah returned to Brittany. He pointed a gun at her and shot her in the shoulder. Brittany survived the gunshot wound. After committing both shootings, Jeremiah fled the scene. Brittany managed to call for help, even though she was seriously injured. Emergency services responded quickly. Paramedics found Khylie already dead at the scene and rushed Brittany to the hospital for treatment. Police reports say Jeremiah exited the apartment and disappeared before law enforcement could arrive. The police immediately launched a manhunt for Jeremiah Jones. He was considered armed and dangerous. His name and photo were released to the public. He was caught soon after, reportedly hiding out at a different location in Houston. He was taken into custody without incident. The investigation confirmed that the crime was not random. It was premeditated and targeted. Authorities believe Jeremiah's primary motive was revenge against Brittany for ending their relationship. Instead of attacking her directly, he chose to hurt her by attacking her daughter, an act that prosecutors described as intentional and calculated. Security camera footage from the apartment complex, phone records, witness statements, and ballistics evidence are all part of the case against him. There is no indication that Jeremiah has expressed remorse or made any public statement about the crime. Within hours of the incident, the Houston Police Department identified Jeremiah Jones as a suspect. The investigation was aided by immediate eyewitness reports and statements from a mother, Brittany Sorrells, who survived the encounter after being shot in the shoulder. Surveillance footage and digital tracking also played a role in narrowing down his location. Jones was captured the next day, on June 14, 2022, by law enforcement. His arrest was made without incident. Authorities confirmed that Jones was located in Houston and that there was no need for an extended search outside city limits. He was transported directly to the Harris County Jail, where he was processed and held for questioning. After the arrest, the Harris County District Attorney's Office filed multiple felony charges against Jeremiah Jones. These charges included: this is the most serious charge under Texas law. It applies when an individual is accused of intentionally killing a child younger than 10. In Texas, capital murder is a capital felony, which makes a defendant eligible for the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. In this case, prosecutors claim that Jeremiah Jones entered the home with premeditated intent. The victim, Khylie Sorrells, was shot at close range, and police found no evidence of struggle, meaning the act was deliberate and targeted. Because Khylie was only 9 years old at the time of her death, this qualified the case under the capital murder statute. The second charge involved the shooting of Brittany Sorrells, who was hit in the shoulder during the incident. Under Texas law, aggravated assault is defined as causing serious bodily injury or using a deadly weapon during the commission of an assault. A handgun was recovered from the scene, and bullet casings were consistent with the injuries sustained. This charge adds another layer of felony prosecution and reflects a harm done to the surviving adult victim. Because of the seriousness of the charges, bond was denied. In Harris County, judges may deny bail in cases involving capital murder. Prosecutors filed a motion asking the court to keep Jones in custody without the possibility of release, citing the violent nature of the crime, risk of flight, ongoing danger to the public. The court agreed with the prosecution. Jeremiah Jones was formally denied bond at his arraignment. He was also placed under high security protocols while in jail. Legal experts observing the case noted that denying bond was not only expected but necessary, given the defendant's prior criminal record and the threat level. At the time of the shooting, Jones was already out on bond for unrelated charges, including illegal firearm possession and evading arrest. This led to additional scrutiny of the bail system in Houston, raising questions about how an individual facing multiple charges was allowed to remain free prior to committing another violent act. Since the arrest, Jeremiah Jones has made several court appearances. His attorneys have requested psychological evaluations and raised procedural concerns, but prosecutors remain confident in their case, citing physical evidence, witness testimony, and security footage. A trial date has not been finalized, but pretrial motions have begun. The defense has not publicly commented on whether they plan to pursue an insanity defense, plea bargain, or prepare for trial. The district attorney's office has not yet announced whether they will pursue the death penalty, although capital murder charges make a possibility under Texas law. The denial of bond and rapid charges were seen by many as appropriate, but they also ignited debate around Texas's bail reform system. Questions were raised about how someone already facing weapons-related charges and multiple allegations of violence was still free to commit further crimes. Local officials pledged to review existing bail policies, especially in domestic violence cases involving children. Some legal professionals argue that more stringent risk assessments are needed during bond hearings when past threats or restraining orders are involved. The shocking murder of Khylie Sorrells at the hands of Jeremiah Jones sparked widespread public outrage. The crime was not only horrific due to the fact that a child was murdered in her own bed, but also because it happened despite numerous warnings, legal actions, and protective measures put in place by the authorities. The public's reaction was one of disbelief and anger. How could the system, designed to protect people from such violence, fail so terribly? From the moment the news of Khylie's death spread, people across the nation expressed their shock and outrage. Social media platforms, news outlets, and community forums were flooded with comments questioning how this could happen. Many felt that the warning signs had been ignored, and the system had failed not only Khylie but also her mother, Brittany Sorrells, who had done everything in her power to protect her daughter. People argued that the justice system, particularly in cases involving domestic violence and restraining orders, often seemed ineffective, allowing dangerous individuals to remain free even after making threats and showing violent tendencies. The outcry centered on a critical question: how could someone like Jeremiah Jones, with a history of violence, continue to threaten Brittany and yet still be out on bond? His release sparked intense debates on whether bail reform was necessary, especially in cases involving domestic violence. The case also reignited debates about bail reform and how the criminal justice system handles people accused of violent crimes. Jeremiah Jones had been granted bond despite having multiple charges against him, including assault and gun possession. Many felt that this decision was reckless, considering the severity of his previous offenses and the threats he had made toward Brittany. In the wake of the crime, some legal experts and advocates for domestic violence victims began calling for changes to how bail is handled in such cases. The concern was that suspects with a violent history, like Jones, should not be granted bond, especially when their victims are already in fear for their lives. Advocates argued that more stringent measures should be taken to protect vulnerable individuals, particularly in situations where there are clear indications of potential harm. At the same time, there were also discussions on the effectiveness of restraining orders, which are often seen as a tool for victims of domestic violence to keep their abusers at a distance. But as the public pointed out in this case, a restraining order didn't prevent Jones from killing Khylie. Instead, it raised serious questions about the reliability of these orders and whether they truly offer enough protection for those at risk. One of the most significant questions raised by the public and experts alike was why Jeremiah Jones had been allowed to remain free after multiple threats and violent behaviors. This question was not only directed at the judge who granted his bond, but also at the broader system that allowed him to walk the streets despite the risks he posed. While some argue that bond is a right for those who are presumed innocent until proven guilty, others question whether the court had given enough weight to repeated threats and violent behavior exhibited by Jones. The public's frustration grew, as they believed that a man who had made clear threats of violence against his ex-girlfriend and had a history of aggression should have been held without bond, or at the very least, monitored more closely. Another question that emerged was why the restraining order, which Brittany Sorrells had obtained to protect herself and her daughter, had failed to prevent Jones from coming to the apartment and committing murder. Restraining orders are meant to keep abusers away from their victims, but in this case, the system didn't do its job. Critics pointed out that the order was clearly not enough to keep Jones at bay. Many people began questioning the effectiveness of restraining orders in general, especially when they are not accompanied by active enforcement or additional protective measures. The public want to know why the courts and law enforcement didn't take more aggressive steps to ensure that Jones, who had already shown violent tendencies, was kept away from Brittany and her daughter. Finally, the tragic events surrounding Khylie's death raise an important and difficult question. How can we improve the system to prevent something like this from happening again? Several ideas were put forward by legal experts, advocates for victims of domestic violence, and concerned citizens. One of the primary suggestions was reforming the bail system, particularly when it comes to violent offenders. Advocates argued that anyone with a history of violent crime, especially those who have made threats or violated restraining orders, should be held without bond, or at the very least, monitored closely to ensure they do not pose a danger to others. Another suggestion was improving the enforcement of restraining orders. Some proposed that authorities should conduct regular check-ins or provide better tracking systems to ensure that individuals who are under restraining orders are not in close proximity to their victims. Additionally, experts recommended expanding public education on domestic violence so that more people understand how to recognize signs of abuse and know what steps to take when they are in danger. As the investigation into Khylie's death continues and the case moves through the legal system, the public's demand for change remains clear. The tragedy of a young girl's life being taken by someone who should never have been allowed near her has become a powerful call to action, urging the justice system to make the necessary reforms to protect the most vulnerable. Shortly after his arrest, Jeremiah Jones was charged with capital murder of a child under 10, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, felon in possession of a firearm. Capital murder in Texas is the highest level of criminal charge. It is punishable by either life imprisonment without parole or the death penalty. On June 14, 2022, Jones appeared in court for the first time. The judge reviewed the charges and denied bond, meaning Jones will remain in jail while awaiting trial. The court stated that due to the violent nature of the crime and his previous charges, he was considered a threat to public safety. During court appearances, Jeremiah Jones initially denied any involvement in the crime. His defense attorney claimed that the allegations were not fully supported by evidence at the time of arrest. They argued that there were still gaps in the case, such as no confirmed DNA at the crime scene, lack of surveillance footage showing him entering the apartment, need for further witness statements. The defense team requested discovery, which is a legal process of obtaining all evidence from the prosecution, including police reports, forensic evidence, ballistics tests, and interviews. They also stated that they would consider mental health evaluations depending on how the case developed. However, there has been no public claim of an insanity defense so far. The prosecutors in Harris County began working immediately to build a strong case for capital murder. Their focus was on proving premeditation, that Jones planned the murder ahead of time; intent, that he meant to kill the child as an act of revenge; criminal background, that he was already on bond for serious charges; prior threats, that Brittany Sorrells had filed reports against him. Prosecutors used witness statements, including the account of Brittany Sorrells, who survived the shooting and identified Jones as the shooter. Other supporting evidence included text messages and past threats made to Brittany, forensic tests on the weapon recovered, phone records placing Jones near the scene at the time of the murder, statements from neighbors who heard gunshots. The district attorney's office confirmed that this case qualified for the capital punishment route. In Texas, This allows the prosecution to seek the death penalty. Court dates: June 14, 2022, first court appearance, bond denied. July 2022, preliminary hearing, prosecution presented initial findings. October 2022, status conference, defense requested more time for evidence review. March 2023, motion hearing, discussion of which evidence is admissible. August 2023, pre-trial hearing scheduled to confirm witness list and trial timeline. Trial date not officially announced as of the last update, but expected late 2024. The delay in trial has been due to the large amount of evidence, witness interviews, and the high-profile nature case. If Jeremiah Jones is found guilty of capital murder, the punishment options are life in prison without parole, death penalty. The prosecution has not yet confirmed whether they will officially seek the death penalty, but they have left it on the table. Legal experts say that because the victim was a child and because the crime involved premeditated violence inside a home, the chances of the death penalty being pursued are high. If found not guilty, Jones could still face trial for the other charges, including gun possession and aggravated assault on Brittany. A plea deal is also a possible outcome. However, based on public statements and court behavior so far, both sides appear to be preparing for a full trial. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share with others who need to hear it. For more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.